there has to be an emphasis on education, and that's clear in Hoj Effendi's writings. It's clear, first of all, because he many times makes the comment that it's all about our children. They're the future, and we have to invest in our children above all. It's one of the most common characteristics of the individuals these men institutions. That I have consistently. Given the way in which, ideally, I'm Ori Saltys. I teach at Georgetown University. Theology, art history, some politics, history, philosophy, across disciplines. My general view of Hizmet is that it's an extraordinary phenomenon in two ways. One, I am, of course, impressed by how far-flung the movement is, how you find individuals and groups involved with it everywhere you go. I just came back from teaching in Georgia at a university there, and it turns out the university is largely sponsored by the Hizmet movement, and that's pure coincidence. But more important is what the word Hizmet means and how the movement expresses that word. And of course, Hizmet means service. And without a single exception, everywhere I've been, every school I visited, every individual I've had more than a 5-minute conversation with exhibits the same sort of qualities of an interest in doing things for others, altruism, helping, making the world a better place. So my view of Hizmet is a very strongly positive one. My views of Hoj Effendi are formed really from two sources. One is that I have read everything that he has written that I can read, because my Turkish is very poor, so I'm, alas, left with reading in English. But everything that I have read by him suggests an individual both of breadth and depth in terms of how he thinks and what he thinks is important, and the relationship that he believes in between humans and each other, humans and God, the way those two relationships work, so that if I call myself someone who loves God, then I have to be someone who loves human beings. And if I do things for other human beings, then I'm doing things for God, even if I'm an atheist and don't believe in God. My form of prayer, he says in one of his writings, is the actions that I do. So part of my impression of him is based on his writing, and I see it as a writing that leads in all kinds of positive directions. And I see it as writing and thinking that's informed by a variety of different kinds of thinkers, from Socrates and Plato to Ibn Arabi and Mevlana Rumi to Einstein. He's got a very broad repertoire of sources, and he integrates them in a very unique kind of way. The second way in which I judge him is all of the people whom I've met who are inspired by him. And they are so singularly, unusually positive, gentle, humble, actively engaged in helping others and doing things for others, that even if I hadn't read anything that he has written, I would have a positive opinion of him just based on the kind of influence he seems to have had and the inspiration he seems to have imposed on an unbelievably large number of people who just act in wonderful ways. I think you can't disconnect Hoj Effendi's contributions from Hizmet's contributions to the world at large. And in my personal experience, what I have most seen, of course, is education. I have been in a number of different schools in the United States, in Georgia, in Turkey, in which I have seen, both by way of the kind of syllabus that these schools offer, the breadth of learning that they seek to yield to their students, but also the way in which study and doing are interwoven with each other. So it's not enough to think about moral issues, let's say, or to think about American literature, or to think about the history of religion, it's to act based on one's thinking in positive ways. And I have found in these institutions teachers and administrators who are enormously dedicated. As I said a moment back, I just came back from teaching for a week in Tbilisi, Georgia, and the school, by pure coincidence, turns out to be a school that is very much run by the Hizmet movement. And I mean, I couldn't turn around without someone wanting to do something for me, trying to help me. And their interest in having me there was to help their students learn more effectively what I had to offer, what I had to teach. No exceptions that I've encountered. There has to be an emphasis on education, and that's clear in Hoja Efendi's writings. It's clear, first of all, because he many times makes the comment that it's all about our children. They're the future, and we have to invest in our children above all, and that means educating them above all. And in that sense, he's, you might say, inspired by Plato, one of whose major works, The Republic, is all about creating an educational system that will create an ideal society with ideal leaders and ideal followers in order to create a just society, because that's what ideal means to Plato. Because the Republic starts out with a question of, well, what is justice? And Socrates says, well, maybe we can't define that so easily, but let's try and be practical about it. Justice is to be rooted in a just city-state, and a just city-state is to be rooted in a just educational system that creates just citizens and just leaders. Clearly, that's an idea that influences and inspires Hoja Effendi, but he goes further than Plato does in two different ways. One, because it wouldn't have occurred to Plato to encompass the world. He's thinking Greeks. And one of the signatures of the educational system of the Hizmet movement, inspired by Hoja Effendi, is to be ubiquitous, to be everywhere, and not just to be in Turkey, or not just to be in Turkic countries, or not just to be in Muslim countries. So everywhere. Second, there were limits to Plato's sense of what a good education includes. It wouldn't have occurred to Plato, although it might have had he thought a little further, to include physical education. And he was hostile to art and poetry because he felt that that doesn't bring out the best in us. Whereas Hoja Effendi's vision, and therefore the Hizmet movement's vision of education, is much broader. So the Hizmet schools typically encompass all of these aspects. It's not just math and science. It's not just grammar and rhetoric. It is all of that stuff. And in our world, it's engineering and it's computer science and it's international diplomacy, but it's also art. It's also poetry. It's also sports. It's also chess. It's everything that helps create students who are three-dimensional, who are full-fledged rather than two-dimensional. And the students are being shaped, and there are two further very important aspects of this shaping, not just to be sponges that absorb all of this knowledge, but to be actors who emulate. And whom do they emulate? Their teachers, the administrators, whom they see as these extraordinarily dedicated individuals who are willing to help them, willing to give them what they need, not just between 8 and 3 and sorry, I'm gone now, but before classes, after classes, on the weekends. I've seen this again and again in my visits and time spent in various Hizmet-inspired schools, that like their teachers, these students are being taught to think, and not just to think about thinking and to be able to speak about what they've thought, but to turn that into altruistic activity, to become those who serve others. The second feature, which is, of course, most interesting, and the feature that would surprise most people who are not familiar with the movement or familiar with the schools, is that religion isn't taught. So it's not just that Islam isn't being taught to anyone, Islam is not being imposed on anyone, and you have a student body in any given place at any given time that is made up of diverse students religiously and ethnically. They're there because you get a really good education in these schools, but no form of religion is being imposed, and not even in some subtle way is it kind of being slipped under the door. It's just not there. So here is a movement and its schools inspired by a very specific set of religious principles. And yet, in effect, these schools are secular schools. And you know what? It won't matter in the end whether the students coming out of those schools are Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Hindu or agnostic or atheist or whatever they are, if they have gained what hopefully they will gain from their education, and they become altruistic exempla of Hizmet in the world, then that's the point. My view of interfaith dialogue, first of all, is that it's essential, that if there is to be a better world for our children and our grandchildren, if there is to be a world that is more filled with peace than with war, more filled with love than with hate, something in which individuals have an opportunity to fulfill themselves in diverse ways, then it's essential that we have interfaith dialogue because there are so many different forms of faith across the planet. Secondly, it strikes me as almost absurd to imagine, if one believes in God, that with the extraordinary diversity that we have and are as a species, you look around you in any room, a room just of Turks, a room just of Georgians, a room just of Frenchmen, of Americans, there are no two people who look alike. So to suppose that there is only one correct path to God strikes me as not only extraordinary, but extraordinarily egotistical, because it means that I place my sense, my understanding, my ego in the path as an obstruction between myself and ourselves and God. So interfaith dialogue is both essential and logical, really, and it's logical if it is dialogue where my intention is really to get a sense of what you are and who you are, because I don't know your particular faith that well, and for you to get a sense of what I am and who I am because you don't know my faith that well, not because I have some intention to convert you to my form of faith, or you have an intention to convert me to your form of faith. That's not true dialogue. That's false dialogue. But true dialogue is really when we're trying to learn about each other. And when we do that, we are immeasurably enriched. Not only am I more enriched if I know something about your form of faith that I didn't know about before, but in trying to express my form of faith to you, I have to think a little bit more about my faith and not just take for granted the things that I learned when I was a kid, when I went to religious school when I was 8 or when I was 18, without thinking. The mere fact of having a dialogue with you in which we discuss whatever the issue is. You know, what do our respective faiths teach about death and the afterlife, let's say? Or what our respective faiths teach about, I don't know, running with short shorts instead of long pants. Whatever it is, it's not just that I'm enriched by learning about you, I'm enriched by having to tell you about me. And so I think it is a very important activity from any number of angles. And it's one that, again, I see inspired for people in the movement by Hoja Effendi. And so part of Hizmet is interfaith, reaching out, multicultural, reaching out. And those who feel that there's something wrong with that, those who feel threatened by it, I would suggest that they look deep into their own hearts and consider whether they truly are believers in the love of God for humankind, or have mistaken their own egotistical sense of how things should be with how things might be.
It's something that's taught in my faith all the time, that you don't just practice the religion within the four walls of your house of worship. There needs to be outreach. When I see Muslim organizations doing that sort of thing, how can you not approve of that? So when I see that that kind of activity is done by folks involved in this movement, I think it's a good thing.
What the movement helps promote is an understanding of how deeply rooted within proper Islam love is, indeed, because it's rooted in a love for God and therefore love for humanity and love of the planet. And all of the actions and activities of Hizmet help galvanize that kind of an understanding.